Tonight on Primetime, European leaders have been paying tribute to Keir Starmer following his resignation. But one reaction has attracted particular attention, that of US President Donald Trump. Some say it's a case of the pot calling the kettle black. Welcome to the program. I'm Andy Miuch. After Keir Starmer announced his resignation, floods of support and well wishes came in from a number of European leaders. But US President Donald Trump weighed in on Starmer's resignation, blaming energy and immigration policies for his political downfall.
Yeah, I was critical only from the set because I think he's a lovely man, but I said you're really messing up energy. You have windmills all over the place. In the meantime, you have the North Sea oil, and they won't let anybody drill. It's one of the great fields in the world, and they haven't even found most. You know that the UK buys much of its energy. You know where? Norway. You know where they get their oil? The North Sea. The UK has a much better portion of the North Sea. They don't want to do it for environmental purposes, okay? And I told him, he's a very nice man. I mean, sort of a friend of mine. I mean, he was not good to us with NATO, Pete, right? He said, we can't use the island to land. That was the first. For a couple of weeks, he said, well, but ultimately, I gave it to you now. That was a bad move. That hurt him badly. But I mean, I wish him well, but he's got two problems, energy and immigration and crime. But energy and immigration. And he's, you know, he's really hurt himself very, very badly. Please go.
Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by Scott Lucas, professor of U.S. and International Relations at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. Welcome, Professor. Great to have you on the program. Now, Trump says that Starmer's downfall was caused by immigration and energy policy. Would you say that he's identifying the actual problems there, or is he just viewing the situation through an American lens?
Okay. I'm afraid that the sound cut out until the last few words, but I think you're asking me about how we view Starmer's resignation through an American lens.
Sorry. I was asking if the U.S. president identified the real reasons behind his resignation as energy policies and immigration, or is he just viewing the situation through an American lens?
Right, okay. Now, with Donald Trump, you always have to cut through the rhetoric to establish what the political reality behind this is. And that is, since Trump took office in January 2025, alongside allies like Elon Musk, he has been working with the UK's hard right party, the Reform Party, to try to get Starmer out of office. Elon Musk even went so far as to say that Keir Starmer should be arrested, should be put in prison. The issues that Trump identifies are part of a broader American strategy to try to destabilize governments across Europe and to undermine the EU. And the two that they're focusing on is, one is Trump will just simply say energy. You'll also hear this as being the idea of net zero being used as a political term, that somehow it's horrible. What in effect is happening is that, of course, the United Kingdom, like many other countries in Europe and many in Asia, are trying to pursue green economies. They're looking at renewable energy as part of a package. They're trying to move away from complete dependence on fossil fuel. But Trump and his allies want fossil fuel only, drill, babe, with drill. Then the other issue, of course, is this misinformation, indeed disinformation, that Europe is being overrun by non-white communities, something that the December national security strategy put forward. Now, the reality on immigration, and indeed the net immigration figures into the UK went down sharply last year, is different from the way Trump portrays it. But Trump doesn't care about reality. He wants to put his vision, his administration's vision, which is that in line with hard right parties on immigration. He wants to see that throughout the continent.
And now, Trump's critics were fast to point out the irony in those remarks, as those problems he's blaming Starmer for were issues that his administration has challenges with. Would you say that argument weakens his criticism?
Well, I think what is happening in the United States is, of course, that Trump overstepped the mark with his own, effectively, war on Minnesota. This is the state where he threw in all these enforcement agents at the start of the year and wound up killing 2 American citizens. And since then, the administration has had to tread a little bit more carefully, but they still push this anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, anti-asylum seeker rhetoric. So I'm not sure it weakens in what he tries to do, but I have to say that effort to basically push, this immigration agenda has been broadly weakened by 2 things. One is that the American economy is not doing that well. And secondly, that Trump's war on Iran has not gone well, and that's made the economic problems worse. And I think that means that, look, Trump can say whatever he wants to about the UK, about Europe, about Azerbaijan, but closer to home, yeah, he's not on a good footing right now.
And we've seen European leaders choose to praise Starmer's achievements, legacy, while Trump pointed out these problems. Does that perhaps bring some light to a rift in political views between Washington and European capitals?
Well, first of all, I think Starmer, in contrast to the domestic problems he faced, which, by the way, stem from Brexit. I mean, if we have a longer discussion, I'll tell you that the reason why 6 British prime ministers have gone in 10 years is because of the shock of Brexit. I think when it came to foreign policy, Starmer was on a much better footing. He did try to build up Britain's relations with Europe, although he would not join the single market. He navigated Trump pretty effectively, despite the U.S. campaign to undermine his government. And he was pretty reliable on issues like Trump's tariff threats. He was especially good as part of that European effort, indeed international effort, to support Ukraine against the Russian invasion. So I think that's genuine from European leaders, but I do think it highlights the fact that Europe itself is realizing that it has to be more self-sufficient. It's simply Trump administration that doesn't believe in allies. You cannot rely on Washington.
And with these latest remarks from the U.S. President, how much of this would you say is actually about Keir Starmer? Because some might say that Trump is really talking about political battles that he himself is facing.
It's not about Keir Starmer. I mean, Keir Starmer, back in early 2025, when Keir Starmer handed Trump an invitation to a state visit signed by King Charles, Keir Starmer was wonderful. He was a tough negotiator, but he was great. This is partly about Trump's ego, and then it is partly about not just Trump, but those around him who have this vision. And let's call it what it is. It's a white nationalist vision. And they want to see that across Europe. They saw the UK government as a threat to that on multiple fronts. And so they had to get rid of Starmer, or they had to try to get rid of Starmer. And if his successor, likely to be Andy Burnham, continues to hold the line against that white nationalism, they'll come for him as well.
And by backing right parties such as the Reform UK, what does the US stand to gain?
Well, it's not what the U.S. stands to gain. In fact, I think it's destabilizing. I think it's actually as bad for U.S.-UK relations, it's bad for U.S.-European relations, it's bad for international relations. But you have a set of people in the White House, including Donald Trump, who have this specific vision that the people that they want to work with are people like Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban in Hungary, hard right parties in Poland, for example, the AfD in Germany, the National Rally in France. It goes back to Trump's first term. It was promoted by his chief strategist, Steve Bannon. They're just being even more aggressive about trying to pursue this in their second term.
And when Trump says these things about the now outgoing British Prime Minister, do you think that the politicians in Westminster should take a closer look into it, or has this just become more about grabbing headlines?
Well, I mean, they need to call out Trump for what it is, which is an attempt to destabilize the government. They need to call it out. But first and foremost, they need to put aside Trump's rhetoric and they need to focus on the issues at home. I mean, Britain's got serious economic issues. I lived in the country for 40 years. I'm still close to it. And this is a country which has been struggling since it left the EU. It's got serious social issues which are magnified by a damaged political culture, damaged by with a damaged media culture. You need to get back to sensible discussion and dialogue in that country, which is a country I still remember with great fondness. That's what they should be focusing on, and as much as they can, they should keep Trump out of the headlines and on the margins.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime and offering your insight.
Thank you.
All right, after a short break, we will be taking a look at the growing partnership between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan and what it could mean for trade and transport across the Caspian. We'll be right back.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Shaken to its very foundation.
Manuel González, Bautista Juan, Francisco Fernández.
Why is there a list of Spanish names at a flight school in the Soviet Union?
I added a year to my real age because otherwise I wouldn't have qualified.
$1,011,697 were paid for the training.
So they gave them Russian names, and nobody would know anything.
They turned them into fighter pilots in 6 months.
Flying, classes, and non-stop.
There were about 20 fatal accidents. That's nothing for 850 kids who knew nothing about aviation.
Any enemies?
There were 40 of them.
I didn't see a single one.
They wore headsets connected by rubber tubes.
In an unknown language.
It was made entirely of wood and fabric.
It doesn't have any brakes either.
The I-16 was like a doll.
We flew at 6,000 meters without oxygen.
Push the stick forward.
Truly scared.
Some pilots would lose consciousness and fall.
In this way, the Republic held out for not 1, but 3 years.
Then the school was closed. If you return to Spain, Franco will execute you.
Stalin approached him and asked, are you Georgian? No, I'm Spanish.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan are looking to strengthen their role in east-west trade and transport corridors. A state visit by Turkmen President Serdar Berdimuhamedov to Baku has resulted in a series of agreements aimed at expanding cooperation across sectors ranging from energy and transport to industry and healthcare.
Turkmen President Serdar Berdimuhamedov arrived in Azerbaijan on Monday for a state visit and was welcomed by President Ilham Aliyev at an official ceremony in Baku. The two leaders then held both private and expanded talks covering political, economic, transport, energy and cultural cooperation. During the meetings, the sides highlighted growing trade links, regional transport corridors and cooperation across the Caspian Sea. They also discussed joint work in international organisations and broader efforts to strengthen bilateral ties. The leaders later took part in an online ceremony presenting oil tanker Dostlug, which means friendship. It was built at the Baku shipyard and gifted by Azerbaijan to Turkmenistan. With a carrying capacity of nearly 8,000 tonnes, the vessel is expected to support transport links across the Caspian Sea. The visit concluded with the exchange of a joint statement and a number of agreements covering customs, energy, agriculture, industry, healthcare, labour, sports and foreign policy cooperation.
Well, for more on the visit and what was discussed between the two leaders, let's bring in our correspondent and host of Inside Politics and Frontline, Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. Could you please walk us through the key moments of the visit? What were the main issues on the agenda, and what did the two presidents talk about?
Absolutely, and the visit was significant, not only because it's reaffirmed the traditional close ties, historical, cultural ties between our two countries, Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan, but it also brought on the agenda its important coordination that exists between two regions, the Caspian region, the South Caucasus, and also the Central Asia. Two countries, Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, are key countries on the Caspian Sea, responded for the development of the transport linkage and communication. And also in the energy sphere, these two states indeed having the largest amount of the fossil fuels, which is at the attention of the global superpowers. I guess everybody has to agree that the Caspian region, Azerbaijan particularly, plays an important role in the European energy security, specifically now when there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, unstable situation in the Middle East. And so Azerbaijan is being considered as an important partner, as a hub in the region. And there were many times Turkmenistan considered as a potential contributor to the Southern Gas Corridor. Therefore, this visit once again highlighted the important stage of the cooperation between two countries, and two leaders also emphasized the intensification in the cooperation in the spheres like energy, economic, Caspian Sea, then the cooperation in the security matters, and etc. So I guess it was a significant visit for two states, not only from the perspective of the historical background, but for the future, like the projects. Two countries signed a number of agreements during this visit, and today they also visited liberated lands, Karabakh. You know yourself probably that Turkmenistan also contributed to the building of the mosque in the Fizuli city, and it's a very important role. It's important contribution that demonstrates that Turkmenistan is fully supports restoration of the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and the process of reconstruction of the liberated territory. So yes, it's a significant visit which will have global consequences, I guess, for two regions and far beyond.
Now, on those agreements you mentioned, there were quite a few signed. What sectors did both sides focus on?
Absolutely, as I already mentioned, it's an economic and transport cooperation, also the energy field. And as you know, Azerbaijan also built the oil tanker called Dostluk, that means friendship, which was granted to Turkmenistan side, and it is also a part of contribution to the future logistical energy cooperation between two countries. So energy field, economic cooperation, and the transport links. Turkmenistan, as I said already, and Azerbaijan plays a very important role from the perspective of cooperation and integration in the Caspian Sea. And the middle corridor, which is on the agenda, not only in between of two countries, but in between of the regions. Middle corridor is an important part of the global China's Belt and Road initiative. It has to connect China with Central Asia through the Caspian Sea, the South Caucasus, and further to Turkey and Europe. Then Zangezur corridor is also on the agenda, which is an important part of the middle corridor. Zangezur corridor to connect Azerbaijan with its exclave Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic through the territory of modern Armenia. And so transport communication, transport coordination in between of two countries, of course, it also matters. And it was widely discussed. But again, as I mentioned before, the visit of two leaders to the liberated lands, the visiting of Shusha city, let's say, the introduction to the president of Turkmenistan, how the reconstruction work is being done in liberated Karabakh. It's an important part. We cannot ignore the fact that after the victory of Azerbaijan during the 44 days of patriotic war in 2020, that the Turkic states, the Central Asian states, of course Turkey were among the first who, let's say, congratulated Azerbaijan on the restoration of its territorial integrity and expressed the willingness to contribute to the restoration processes. And now we see the consequences of this. So During this visit, the leader of Turkmenistan could see by himself on how this process is going on and how probably Karabakh for the future can be also integrated to the economic and transport initiative in the region of the South Caucasus, Caspian Sea, and Central Asia.
And you've pointed out that transport and connectivity were heavily discussed during this visit. What could we hear from the President Aliyev and Berdimuhamedov? What did they say on cooperation across the Caspian and the development of regional infrastructure?
I guess it's important to mention what President Ilham Aliyev, President of Azerbaijan, mentioned there, the importance of expanding the cargo transportation across the Caspian Sea. We are talking too much about the middle corridor, its significance, and everybody in the region and far beyond, even in Europe, and even American President Donald Trump himself mentioned many times the importance of the development of the alternative routes. But in order to make the project to be operational, to have a smooth operation, all of the small things which may seem small at the first signs, like the cargo flows, the taxes procedure, the proper and modern transport links are on the agenda to be built in coordination between the all countries which are on the path of this road. Therefore, such bilateral meetings indeed helps to discuss in details on what exactly are on the agenda and how it can be, if there are any troubles, if there are any problems, how exactly they can be removed in coordination. I do remember the time when there were some, let's say, difficulties in the bilateral relations between two countries due to the, let's say, the Caspian Sea and the proper, let's say, the proper division of the Caspian Sea, which was still on the agenda some years before. But as for today, we can see that there is no this issue anymore on the agenda, and two countries may have a proper cooperation in energy field. And just imagine if Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan unite the efforts in the energy field, how it may contribute to the global energy security. Yes, now United States and Iran had that memorandum of understanding on the agenda and working together on the comprehensive agreement to be signed, but still the openings of the Strait of Hormuz will take time, and the proper operation of this line will definitely take the time. So everybody, I guess, all the global powers are willing to see the development of alternative routes. So yes, from the global perspective, we can accept that Azerbaijan and all 5 Central Asian states have good relations, but these bilateral meetings indeed have good consequences to discuss in details of the project, which may more closely unite the countries and bring more issues on the future perspectives to be done.
And Anastasia, let's go back just for a minute to that oil tanker Dostluk, or friendship. We saw the leaders participate in the presenting ceremony. What's the significance of this vessel, and what kind of a role can it play when it comes to developing transport corridors in the region?
First of all, on the practical side, it will definitely strengthen the maritime transport capacity on the Caspian Sea. That's number one, and will support definitely the growing volume of energy and commercial cargo moving between eastern and western shores of the Caspian Sea. So here you can understand by yourself that we are not talking only about 2 countries, but about 2 regions to be interconnected. Specifically, I'm talking about the southern South Caucasus and Central Asia and the Caspian Sea, which is connecting 2 regions through Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. So over the recent years, indeed, 2 bilateral relations are intensified, and this just done by Azerbaijani side first, I guess, demonstrate indeed very friendly relations in between the 2 countries. The second, as I already said, it will intensify the cargo flows, the energy flows between 2 countries, and it will also help to It will also demonstrate the capabilities of Azerbaijan in building, manufacturing such kind of oil tankers. Azerbaijan have a good experience on that, and having a capability to present, to gift a huge oil tanker to the friendly, brotherly countries. That's a huge gest, which will be appreciated, I guess, not only by Turkmenistan itself, but by many countries and other countries in Central Asia as well. And it will increase the scope of cooperation at that's a more progressive level for the future. Particularly since we see that everybody in the region are willing to see more intensified cooperation within the Caspian Basin. So it sends, I guess, a broader message that Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan are investing not only into the infrastructure, but also in a shared vision of regional connectivity between two regions.
And looking ahead, what do you think might follow this visit, and what have we been hearing from officials from both countries when it comes to the future of Azerbaijan-Turkmenistan?
What we see now, it's a practical cooperation. It's good that two states already have a good background, coming back to what we have seen from the historical cooperation. It's nice to have the signed agreements, but now it's time to realize what have been agreed during this 2 days visit. I will say very intensified program, with intense program. And so now with the agreement signed during this visit, the real measure for successful operation of the agreed achievements have to be put on the agenda for the concrete projects to be implemented. And it's good that we can see how two leaders are willing to implement. You know, the documents are which our president is signing. I mean, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, is, they are usually being implemented within months if it's not such a large project, or the years, 1 or 2 years. So I guess, and the president of Turkmenistan have the same approach, like he's also following the achieved agreements. So, and if I'm not mistaken, the president of Turkmenistan also been to Azerbaijan last year, if I'm not mistaken. So we see this procedure and we see this program on how two leaders are willing to have more close partnership. So now it's bilateral meetings and achieved agreements which are on the agenda to have more practical implementations. But I will not be surprised that for the future it will be enlarged to the scope of regional cooperation. And I'm more than sure that Turkmenistan is also willing to see the peaceful coexistence in the region of the South Caucasus, the peaceful development between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And now Azerbaijan indeed provides more opportunities for Armenia to become a transport hub in the region. There is also telecommunication in between of two countries in the region of the South Caucasus, and Azerbaijan already have a good experience in this practice in this sphere with Central Asia. So in the case of Armenia, final decision to have the final comprehensive peace agreement with Azerbaijan, it will open more opportunities for Yerevan, specifically now after the elections, to be a part of these agreements signed by Azerbaijan, Central Asian states, Turkey, then also within the cooperation of the Organization of Turkic States. This is a real chance. So if we see after some time after, of course, the comprehensive agreement signed with Azerbaijan, probably Armenia also will have a chance to join these regional projects and to have more independent economy, which will benefit its government and its people as well.
Great insights there, Anastasia. Thank you kindly for analysis as always.
Thank you.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a look at the top business stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away.
We are in Seoul, the Republic of Korea, a country that for more than 70 years has lived in a shadow of unfinished war.
I was 18 years old when the Korean War broke out.
My two brothers were dragged out to the front yard of the village public hall and forcibly subjected to a trial under the name of People's Trial.
The military demarcation line, created after the Korean War, became a massive wall, preventing separated families from meeting.
Less than a kilometer away lies North Korea.
지금 우리 무장력은 그 어떤 위기에도 대응할 철저한 준비가 되어 있으며
Подписанный сегодня договор предусматривает в том числе оказание взаимной помощи в случае агрессии против одного из участников.
Russian-Ukraine war now is connected with North Korean participation in Russian army.
The complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is the only outcome that we will find acceptable.
If the U.S. persists in such hostile policy towards the DPRK, there will never be denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Welcome back. Now it's time for the top business stories of the day. And for those, we turn to Katie Wilson. Katie, what have you got for us tonight?
So there's renewed trade tensions between the US and China, and we've also got the latest from Heineken, Ferrari and South Korea's chip-making industry. So first this evening, China and the United States are escalating their technology and trade dispute once again. Beijing has added 10 American firms, including rare earth producers, to its export control list in response to recent US restrictions on Chinese companies.
China added more US entities to its export control list on Monday. It accused them of being linked to the US military. The list stops Chinese dual-use exports to the companies. MP Materials and USA Rare Earth, as well as 8 other firms, were added. The move is in retaliation for Washington placing a number of Chinese companies under restrictions last month. The Pentagon-supported MP Materials operates the only active rare earth mine in the US, and it, like USA Rare Earth, is also involved in the mine-to-magnet supply chain. Aviox was also placed on the list. It's a motor manufacturer for mission-critical applications. The 3 US companies weren't available for comment outside of business hours. The measures are a response to what Beijing called the, quote, US government's malicious practice. Chinese authorities said it aimed to safeguard national security and interests and fulfill international obligations like non-proliferation. The move accounts to a full ban on dual-use exports to the named firms and tightens rules that previously only required export licenses. But some analysts said China's actions were a largely symbolic response to an earlier move by the US. They argue most of the companies are US defense industry players and likely won't do business in China. The Pentagon previously made its own list of Chinese tech companies it believes to be aiding the country's military. The list was updated this month to include tech firms Alibaba and Baidu, as well as auto giants BYD and NIO.
Artificial intelligence is reshaping the tech industry, and Oracle's latest figures offer a glimpse of that shift. The cloud computing giant says its workforce shrank by around 21,000 employees over the past year as it restructured operations and expanded its AI ambitions.
Oracle's total workforce declined 13%, or about 21,000 employees in its fiscal 2026. It says the cloud computing giant continued restructuring its business, partly driven by the adoption of AI across its operations. The company had a total workforce of 141,000 as of May the 31st, down from about 162,000 as of the same period last year. Oracle's annual filing said it spent $1.84 billion in severance payments and other exit costs. It follows multiple reports earlier this year about Oracle cutting thousands of jobs. The company did not respond to a Reuters request for comment. Worries are quickly mounting over job losses due to AI disruption. 196 tech companies, laid off more than 119,000 employees so far this year. That's according to a website tracking sector-wide job cuts. Oracle has in recent months signed massive data center deals with OpenAI and Meta to compete more forcefully with rivals such as Amazon and Microsoft. However, unlike these tech giants who fund their substantial outlays through large cash flows, Oracle has had to resort to burning cash and issuing debt. Shares of the company are down about 10% this year.
Amazon's annual Prime Day shopping event gets underway this week, but analysts say the real story may not be how much Americans spend, it's what they're buying. With households still feeling the pinch of higher living costs, this year's discounts are increasingly focused on everyday essentials rather than luxury treats.
This week's Amazon Prime Day, which is actually a 4-day shopping blitz, will be a litmus test for the spending power of American consumers who have been squeezed by elevated inflation driven by high gas prices. With that in mind, what shoppers buy will be just as important as how much they spend. This year, Amazon is featuring deals on groceries, household goods, travel and school items over carefree splurges on bigger ticket items. Or, as the CEO of small business lender Cardiff put it, quote, "People just don't have the cash right now. Prime Day isn't going to be about buying big TVs or fun stuff this year. It's for buying toilet paper and garbage bags on sale. Families are literally waiting for these discounts just to buy regular, everyday things because their bank accounts are empty." The event, which kicks off Tuesday, was shifted to June from July for the first time in 5 years, in part to avoid competing with World Cup matches and the country's 250th birthday. While rivals Walmart and Target have shadowed Prime Day for years, the overlap has turned it into a synchronized industry event, intensifying price competition. Walmart's 7-day sale started Monday, while Target's Circle Deal days align exactly with Prime Day. But Amazon is expected to capture more than 60% of all U.S. online retail spending during the 4-day Prime Day period, according to market research firm eMarketer.
Ferrari is pushing back against suggestions that loyalty to its new electric future comes with strings attached. The luxury car maker says customers will not be required to buy its EVs to gain access to future limited edition models, as it seeks to reassure enthusiasts amid a mixed reception to its first all-electric offering.
Ferrari said it's not forcing clients to buy its divisive Luce electric car to qualify for the purchase of its next limited series models. That's according to Ferrari executive Enrico Galliera. It comes after a report by Bloomberg that buying the $630,000 EV could become a requirement for access to Ferrari's most exclusive models. Galliera said applying that kind of pressure would be a huge mistake. The luxury car maker traditionally runs an allocation system which favours established clients, usually owners of multiple models, as well as those who take part in factory events and retain cars for long periods. Galliera said Ferrari always told its dealers and customers that Luce had to be sold only to those truly motivated to buy it. The car maker unveiled the 5-seat Luce EV last month. It saw a flurry of criticism over the model's unconventional design compared to Ferrari's typical muscular and aggressive aesthetic. Also, the company faced criticism for its decision to deviate from its legacy petrol-powered engines.
Heineken is turning to an outsider to lead its next chapter. The Dutch brewer has named Rafael Oliveira as its new chief executive, betting that fresh leadership can help revive growth at a time when beer demand is under pressure and major drinks companies across the industry are looking for new ways to boost sales.
Dutch beer maker Heineken has appointed Rafael Oliveira as its new chair and CEO. It joins several alcoholic drinks makers seeking to galvanise sales through a change of leadership. Oliveira has been the CEO of Dutch coffee and tea maker JDE Peet's since 2024. The company says he will join Heineken, the world's #2 brewer, for 4 years from October the 1st. Heineken's shares rose 1.8% in early trade, outperforming the broader market. Previous CEO Dolf van den Brink led Heineken for 6 years. He announced his surprise resignation in January, and the company has been without a CEO since the start of June. His departure was one of several across the consumer goods industry over the last year, including at major drinks peers Diageo and Rémy Cointreau, where hiring committees and investors have turned to external candidates hoping they can inject fresh energy. Oliveira will have the task of leading Heineken through a plan to cut 6,000 jobs to revive sales volumes despite a forecast decline in global beer demand, and to catch up with rival AB InBev's investor returns.
And finally, forget doctors, lawyers and investment bankers. In South Korea, workers at the country's chip-making giant are enjoying soaring sales, hefty bonuses and, it seems, a major boost to their marriage market appeal. It looks like the global AI boom is creating winners in some unexpected places.
There's a new member of South Korea's A-list. Chip factory staffers are suddenly enjoying hot demand, and not just at work. They've also become a very desirable commodity in the country's competitive marriage market. The change comes as the global AI boom sees salaries soar at top tech firms. Some workers at Samsung's chip division are set for bonuses of about $416,000. That's around 14 times South Korea's average annual salary. There are big payments too at arch-rival SK Hynix. Now all that has chip workers rivaling doctors and lawyers as the nation's most desirable partners. Lee Sung-mi is a consultant at matchmaking agency Sunu. She says tech staffers now rate very highly.
Scores for Samsung Electronics employees have recently risen from 83 to 87. As for clients who work at SK Hynix, their scores are expected to climb from around 80 to 83. Showing just how highly favored the company has become.
The big payouts are also reshaping South Korea's job market. There too, the medical and legal professions had long ranked at the top. Now career advisors and students both say there's hot competition to get into the tech firms. Ambitious young people are even looking to vocational schools, since some chip jobs only need a high school diploma. Park Jun-young is a career consultant for university students.
Semiconductors are arguably the only industry that can truly ride the AI boom. They've taken center stage, and the result is outsized salaries and bonuses. So much so that, in effect, it's created a different tier.
At Korea University, a semiconductor engineering course has seen admission scores hit historic highs. And it's drawing students who might once have aimed for medical school. Freshman Koo Bon-ho is one.
I chose semiconductor engineering major because I figured campus life would be a bit easier than in medical school.
The
internships wouldn't be as long, and since I wanted to get a job quickly and enter the workforce.
With chips accounting for around 40% of the country's exports, some say it's time the tech workers got their due. Right now, staffers at Samsung and SK Hynix are certainly reaping the financial and romantic rewards of the AI boom.
That's this evening's business news. Back to you, Andy.
Very interesting stuff as always, Katie. Thank you so much. All right, after a short break, we'll take a closer look at Kazakhstan's efforts to deepen ties with the European Union as competition for influence in Central Asia continues to intensify. We'll be right back.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Manuel González, Bautista Juan, Francisco Fernández.
Why is there a list of Spanish names at a flight school in the Soviet Union?
I added a year to my real age because otherwise I wouldn't have qualified.
$1,011,697 were paid for the training.
So they gave them Russian names, and nobody would know anything.
They turned them into fighter pilots in 6 months.
Flying, classes, and non-stop.
There were about 20 fatal accidents. That's nothing for 850 kids who knew nothing about aviation.
Any enemies?
There were 40 of them.
I didn't see a single one.
They wore headsets connected by rubber tubes.
In an unknown language.
It was made entirely of wood and fabric.
It doesn't have any brakes either.
The I-16 was like a doll.
We flew at 6,000 meters without oxygen.
Push the stick forward.
Truly scared.
Some pilots would lose consciousness and fall.
In this way, the Republic held out for not 1, but 3 years.
Then the school was closed. If you return to Spain, Franco will execute you.
Stalin approached him and asked, Are you Georgian? No, I'm Spanish.
Welcome back to Primetime. As Europe seeks new sources of critical minerals and alternative trade routes, Kazakhstan is positioning itself as an increasingly important strategic partner. Fariza Kalimurzina has the details.
Kazakhstan, which produces 21 of the 34 raw materials considered critical by the European Union, is set to establish an international accredited chemical and analytical laboratory for critical raw materials under a memorandum signed in Brussels during President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's visit to the European Union. The memorandum was part of a broader package of agreements covering transport, aviation and industry. The documents signed in the presence of European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, European Council President Antonio Costa and President Tokayev also include a new air services agreement between Kazakhstan and the European Union and a purchase agreement between Air Astana and Airbus. Another agreement signed in Brussels is linked to the development of the Trans-Caspian Transport Corridor. Under the deal, Kazakhstan is set to borrow around 420 million euros from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development for the upgrade of 234 kilometers of road infrastructure along the Middle Corridor. Tokayev also held talks with the Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever. The discussions focused on transport and logistics, critical minerals, agriculture, artificial intelligence and financial services. Belgium has invested $15 billion in Kazakhstan over the past 2 decades, while bilateral trade exceeded $580 million last year. The talks concluded with plans for future visits. The Belgian Prime Minister accepted an invitation to visit Kazakhstan, while a visit by Belgium's King Philippe to Astana is also expected. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Well, joining me now is Tugrul Keskina, professor at Turan University, joining us from Almaty, Kazakhstan. Professor, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Primetime. Kazakhstan has spent years pursuing what it calls a multi-vector foreign policy. Now, as competition between the West, Russia and China intensifies, is that strategy becoming somewhat harder to sustain?
Thank you for having me, first of all. Greetings from the Kazakhstan, Almaty. I would argue that intensifications of the competition among major powers actually reinforce the importance of the Kazakhstan's multi-vector foreign policy rather than undermining it. President Tokayev's foreign policy doctrine is fundamentally rooted in the idea that Kazakhstan sovereignty based on Kazakhstan sovereignty, security, and economic development are best protected through the diversified partnership rather than exclusive alignments between United States, China, Russia, and European Union. I mean, since the independence, Kazakhstan has successfully maintained constructive relations with Russia, China, European Union, and the United States, and Turkey also, and the Gulf states, especially the last 2 years, and other international actors. I mean, this approach reflects the country's unique geopolitical position at the heart of the Eurasia. I mean, Eurasia is a very important place. Let's not forget, for China, Russia, European Union, and Turkey, and the United States. Actually, the President Tokayev has consistently emphasized that Kazakhstan foreign policy must be based on national interests rather than ideological or bloc-based politics, like in the Cold War era before 1991. This principle has become even more important in today's increasingly polarized world, as we see last several months actually. And the essence of the multi-vector diplomacy is not neutrality in the passive sense, but active engagement, according to Tokayev and Kazakhstan foreign policy, with multiple partners simultaneously. Kazakhstan seeks investment from Europe, connectivity through China, regional cooperation with the Central Asian neighbors, security dialogue with Russia, and constructive relations with the United States.
Well,
this is for Kazakhstan benefits, actually.
Well, for one of those vectors, we've been hearing European leaders increasingly talk about Kazakhstan's strategic importance. From Astana's perspective, is Europe emerging as a genuine long-term partner or simply just an additional option alongside Russia and China?
I mean, as far as I see, Europe is certainly emerging as a genuine long-term partner for Kazakhstan. But it's important to understand that Astana or Tokayev government or Kazakhstan does not view international partnership through zero-sum geopolitical framework. One of the defining characteristics of Kazakhstan foreign policy under Tokayev is the rejections of the notion that closer relation with the one partner must come at the expense of the another, like China, United States, and Russia, basically, or European Union. But from Kazakhstan perspective, Europe is not substitute for Russia or China, nor is merely temporary alternative. Rather, Europe represents an important pillar for the Kazakhstan's broader multi-vector diplomacy strategy. This distinction is crucial for understanding how Astana approaches the international relations.
And a great deal of attention is understandably focused on the Middle Corridor and alternative trade routes linking Asia and Europe. Is Kazakhstan now becoming indispensable to those plans, or is there still a gap between ambition and reality, would you say?
I mean, Kazakhstan is increasingly becoming indispensable to discussions about the Middle Corridor and the future of the Eurasian connectivity between East Asia, China, Central Asia, Caucasus, and the Middle East and Europe, actually. In many respects, it's difficult to imagine any viable long-term transportation trade architecture linking East Asia, Central Asia, Caucasus, Europe, without Kazakhstan playing the central role. And Kazakhstan is very much aware of this. The country's geography alone gives enormous strategic significance, actually. And situated at the heart of the Eurasia, Kazakhstan serves as a natural bridge connecting some of the world's most important economic regions and vital regions, including the South Asia, basically. But however, significance of the Kazakhstan goes beyond the geography. I mean, Tokayev, the government has invested considerable political economic capital in transforming the countries in the economy, the countries in the major transportation, logistic, commercial hub, actually, including technological hub. The objective is not simply facilitate trade passing through the Kazakhstan, but integrate the country more deeply into regional, global value chains while enhancing its own economic development including the new deal with Iran also. Let's not forget. Therefore, Middle Corridor is important. Often referred to as Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. Has attracted increasingly attention in recent years because it offers additional route connecting Asia and Europe through Central Asia and the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia, South Caucasus and Turkey. For Europe, this route contributes greater connectivity with Asia. And this will create a development in Central Asia, not just development in Central Asia, but in the entire region, including Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Iran and Pakistan, basically, connectivity with the Southeast Asia.
Well, Professor, as you've pointed out a bit earlier there, Kazakhstan has been careful not to choose any sides in many of today's geopolitical disputes. Can it continue walking that diplomatic tightrope, or will there come a point when neutrality becomes much more difficult?
I mean, I think it's important to clarify that Kazakhstan is often described as a neutrality, but in reality it's better understood as a strategic autonomy through the multi-vector diplomacy. I mean, Tokayev has never been isolation or disengagement from international affairs. On the contrary, Kazakhstan is an active participant in regional and global diplomacy. And what distinguishes Kazakhstan is its determination to maintain independent decision-making and avoid becoming subordinate to any geopolitical bloc. This is very important for the Kazakhstan. Between Russia, one side, and the other side, China and the United States and Turkey, India has been playing very important role in Central Asia as well. But this approach has become one of the defining characteristics of Kazakhstan foreign policy since independence, under Nazarbayev. Rather than viewing the world through the framework of competing alliances, Tokayev government has consistently sought constructive relations with all major powers while safeguarding its sovereign and national interests. I mean, Tokayev met with Trump 3 times, with Xi Jinping, Chinese president, 2 times in the last 7-8 months, actually. And Russian president, I think, 2 times, as far as known, and Turkish president also. This is very important for the Kazakhstan.
And in that vein, Professor, when we look at this trip to Brussels, is Tokayev seeking closer ties with Europe, or is he also sending a message that Kazakhstan intends to remain independent of any single sphere of influence?
I mean, I believe the most important message emerging from the Tokayev's visit to Brussels, European Union, is not that Kazakhstan is choosing Europe over other partners, but rather Kazakhstan remains firmly committed to its long-standing policy of strategic autonomy and multi-vector diplomacy. I mean, in many ways, the visit itself is a demonstration of Kazakhstan's foreign policy philosophy, maintaining strong relations with all major international actors, and while preserving the country's independence and freedom of action. And certainly, Tokayev is seeking closer ties with Europe. European is one of the Kazakhstan's most important economic partners, and largest source of the foreign direct investment is coming from the European Union, and key actor in the areas such as technology transfer, industrial modernization, education, renewable energy, transportation, and sustainable development. It is therefore entirely natural that Astana will seek deepen cooperation with European institutions and European governments.
Professor Keskin, thank you so much for joining us on Primetime and sharing your analysis.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after a break, we'll take a closer look at the latest understanding between Washington and Tehran and why both sides are telling very different stories about what has been agreed. Don't go away.
Looking back on the past is important to learn from experience. It is like a chronicle, page by page. War, Auschwitz, Love, humor.
What was the atmosphere like in your home? Perhaps even a particular smell that you associated with?
The smell of the theater. Soviet Union had many shortcomings, and the world we live in today gives us little reason for optimism.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Washington and Tehran have reached a significant new understanding following talks in Switzerland. But despite signs of progress, both sides continue to offer sharply different interpretations of what exactly has been agreed.
A tense diplomatic breakthrough driven by military pressure. US President Donald Trump and Iranian chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf have confirmed major economic and military agreements following Swiss talks. Tehran has secured critical oil and banking waivers alongside the release of $12 billion in frozen assets. But Trump mandates this capital be spent exclusively on American agricultural imports.
Money that's being unfrozen is going to be used to buy food, and the food's going to be bought exclusively through the United States from our farmers. And corn, soybeans, all of the things they need are going to be bought from our farmers. So our farmers are very happy. I've had a lot of calls. They were very happy about this.
The American president linked this diplomatic shift directly to hard military action, marking the one-year anniversary of Operation Midnight Hammer, a strategic strike he claims permanently altered the regional balance.
It was the most successful attack that anyone's ever seen with a bomber that totally wiped out their nuclear potential. If we didn't do that, you'd have no Israel right now. They were 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon.
Tehran, meanwhile, rejects Washington's narrative, framing the signed oil and banking waivers as a resistance victory. In transit, Khalibaf confirmed the temporary exemptions are legally secured, but warned that pre-war control over the strategic Strait of Hormuz is permanently over.
Everyone should know that the administration of the Strait will never return to the way it was before the war. These temporary restrictions must be lifted until we are able to remove the sanctions completely.
While both nations agreed to a direct shipping hotline to prevent overnight clashes in the waterway, Washington warns its total naval blockade can reactivate within 15 minutes if Tehran violates the pact.
Iran is drawing clear red lines as it seeks to turn recent talks with the United States into a broader diplomatic process. While signaling a willingness to continue engagement on its nuclear program, Tehran insists key areas of its national security remain non-negotiable, highlighting the challenges that could still lie ahead for any lasting agreement. Turaj Shiralelu has the details.
Iran's foreign ministry refuted reports that Tehran will grant access to International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect its civilian nuclear sites bombed by Israel and US last June. Spokesman Esmail Baghai also told a weekly press briefing that Iranian negotiators did not meet with the UN nuclear watchdog chief in Switzerland. To a question on whether Iran's nuclear program was discussed with the US officials, he said the issue will be considered after completion of the 60-day period on implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding. Baghai also stressed the reciprocal basis of the memorandum, saying that the nuclear issue will not be discussed if the US fails to carry out its obligations. The spokesman categorically rejected reports that Iran's military might was discussed with the US officials. He said that the ballistic missiles capability was not a subject on the agenda of the Swiss talks, adding that it will not be negotiated with any other party either. Baghai further ruled out any role by the European Union in implementing the Iran-US MOU. He said the European bloc isolated itself by taking side with the US and Israel to reimpose the UN Security Council's nuclear sanctions on Iran last year. When asked about US officials' statements on spending Iran's unfrozen assets, the spokesman rejected any imposition of its purchase list. Turaj Shiralilu from Iranian Foreign Ministry for A News.
Well, to discuss the significance of this agreement and what it could mean for relations between Washington and Tehran, I'm joined now by Siavash Soltani, Iranian political analyst, Secretary General of the Iran National Front, and founder of the Universal Liberal Union. Welcome, great to have you on the show. A very interesting situation, this, isn't it, with both sides claiming victory. But when you look beyond the rhetoric, who has actually come away with the better deal, do you think?
Well, behind the rhetoric, I would say that it is not a clear history for other sides. But Iran has the upper hand at this stage. You know, Iran gained economic bracing space, access to some frozen assets. Right now, the reports say 12 billion upfront and up to 24 or 25 billion dollars on the next stage. And temporary sanctions relief for 60 days. And Tehran actually gained all of it without surrendering its main positions. Not any agreement, clear agreement on highly enriched uranium, on the future of uranium enrichment right itself, whether it's going to be banned totally or limited to about 3.5%, or about the actually timeline of it, being banned for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. And not any agreement on missile capabilities and their range. So I think here US just gained a reduction in escalation and the diplomatic channel and possibility of renewing monitoring and technical talks. So my conclusion is simple. Washington gained the diplomatic process, but Iran has the upper hand.
Well, we've been hearing a lot of messages coming from Washington and Tehran. We've got Donald Trump saying that military pressure has forced Iran to make concessions. We've heard Tehran saying that they got their sanction waivers on oil without compromising on their core principles. Which interpretation would you say is closer to reality?
Well, I think Trump is correct about one thing. This military pressure actually led Iran to come back to the table. And before, Iran was not doing, and Iran was not accepting to come back to the table. But actually, Iran returned to the table without surrendering its positions. and it did not actually surround itself on position like regional policy and proxies or missile capabilities or uranium enrichment, right? So I think both of parts, they partly true here, but it is not the same as Mr. Trump says.
When it comes to Iranian frozen assets that are allegedly about to be unfrozen, Americans are saying that those come with conditions attached. Now, would you say then that these funds are a genuine concession, or is there something more there?
I think in the short term, they are meaningful relief. And they could actually impact. But they are limited, you know. Iran right now have access up to $25 billion and temporary oil sanctions relief for 30 days. That it actually impacts its hard currency and actually gives domestic bracing space. But they are not the same as
we're having some sound issues there. Siavash, can you hear me clearly? Yeah, I can hear you now. Please go on.
But, but it is not the full removal of sanctions and economic normalization. So I would call it a real relief, but not real normalization.
Well, one thing that Iran has been adamant about is that its missile program is off the table. We've heard U.S. President Donald Trump say at the G7 summit in France that everyone has to have some missiles and that it wouldn't be fair that Iran hasn't got any if Saudi Arabia has some. Does that tell us that there are hard limits to what can be achieved through this negotiation?
Yes, absolutely. You know, missile program right now is one of the hard limits of this process. For Tehran, missiles are not just weapons. Missiles are part of Iran's deterrence and regime security. And Islamic Republic believes if it negotiates its missiles program away, actually it puts its survival in danger. But for Israelis and Persian Gulf states, they actually, Israelis see this as a main security danger, Iranian missile program. And especially after this war, Persian Gulf states consider it as a practical threat to the civilian and energy facilities in the region. So I think this missile program is one of the hard limits of one of the main hard limits of this process.
And Siavash, if this latest agreement does indeed hold, what do you believe comes next? Do you see a start of something more significant between Washington and Tehran, or is this just another pause before a new flare-up?
You know, for now, I consider it as a pause. Rather than beginning of a real transformation. A real and bigger transformation will actually happen if both parts could address deeper issues like highly enriched uranium enrichment, missiles ranges, and regional policy. But for now, both sides define success differently. So Washington wants actually Iran's nuclear and regional power permanently restricted, but Tehran wants sanctions relief and not losing its tools that it sees as its regime's protection. So I think this agreement may reduce the risks and danger in the short term, but the confrontation can easily return.
Siavash, thank you kindly for joining us on Primetime and sharing your thoughts and insight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents across the globe. Do stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Manuel González, Bautista Juan, Francisco Fernández.
Why is there a list of Spanish names at a flight school in the Soviet Union?
I added a year to my real age because otherwise I wouldn't have qualified.
$1,011,697 were paid for the training.
So they gave them Russian names, and nobody would know anything.
They turned them into fighter pilots in 6 months.
Flying, classes, and non-stop.
There were about 20 fatal accidents. That's nothing for 850 kids who knew nothing about aviation.
Any enemies?
There were 40 of them.
I didn't see a single one.
They wore headsets connected by rubber tubes.
In an unknown language.
It was made entirely of wood and fabric.
It doesn't have any brakes either.
The I-16 was like a doll.
We flew at 6,000 meters without oxygen.
Push the stick forward.
Truly scared.
Some pilots would lose consciousness and fall.
In this way, the Republic held out for not 1, but 3 years.
Then the school was closed. If you return to Spain, Franco will execute you.
Stalin approached him and asked, are you Georgian? No, I'm Spanish.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now let's take a look at the latest from our regional correspondents, beginning in the South Caucasus. A major transit operation is underway, with more than 400 tons of Russian agricultural supplies moving by rail to Armenia via Azerbaijani territory. The shipment has now cleared transit hubs and is heading towards the Armenian border. Leila Rahimli has more.
We are seeing significant activity on the regional transit and cargo routes today, with fresh shipments moving across Azerbaijani borders. Just today, on June 23rd, 6 wagons of fertilizer made their way from Russia through Azerbaijan, heading directly toward Armenia. To be exact, this 408-ton cargo was dispatched from Azerbaijan Railways Belachari station, moving toward Böyükesik. From there, the train will cross into Georgia Georgia before making its final turn toward Armenia. Around that same time, over at the Belejari station, Azerbaijan Railways also sent off an 18-wagon train loaded with over 1,200 tons of wheat to Armenia. To put all of this into perspective, these numbers are part of a much larger ongoing trade flow. Looking at the overall volume so far, Azerbaijan has already exported over 14,000 tons of diesel and more than 4,000 tons of petrol directly to Armenia. Well, as we can see, this regional logistics networking is running at full capacity. That's all from me. I am Leila Rahimli with my cameraman Zainal Hassanov for A News.
Meanwhile, Baku has hosted an international conference on circular green tourism, bringing together representatives from member states of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia. Discussions focused on sustainable tourism, regional cooperation, and creating new opportunities for local communities. Ilknur Seydamirova reports.
The future of sustainable tourism took center stage in Baku on Tuesday. International experts, policymakers and tourism officials gathered for the conference, Circular Green Tourism in the SICA countries. Jointly organized by Azerbaijan State Tourism Agency and the Secretariat of the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, the event brought together delegations from SICA member states across Central Asia, the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
In the beautiful city of Baku as a practical area of cooperation.
The main objective of this conference, as you asked, is to bring all SICA member states to Azerbaijan and create a platform for them to discuss circular economy principles in tourism, regenerative tourism, how to achieve beyond sustainability and to create cooperation and trust building among these states.
Opening the conference, State Tourism Agency Chairman Fuad Nagiev described circular green tourism as a key path for the industry's future and highlighted Azerbaijan's efforts to expand ecotourism, agrotourism and nature-based travel experiences. SICA Secretary General Kairat Sarıbay, meanwhile, stressed the role of tourism in fostering sustainable growth, cultural exchange and cooperation among nations.
If you promote tourism, you have to be environmentally friendly. Why? Because we are living in a time when the climate change is crucial. And we have to protect the environment for our further generations. So I believe promoting tourism must be very much in a sustainable way, with the due respect to our nature, to preserve the diversity of our planet for the next generation. So I believe that it is actually a trend now that instead of mass tourism, people trying to look into the cultural assets also in a sustainable way that will not damage the environment of our planet. This demonstrates that green tourism, environmental policy.
Circular approaches to tourism allow us to think in a more systemic way. Tourism is not a sector that can operate in isolation. The sector has a very cross-cutting and transversal value chain involving from transport to food providers, textiles, accommodation, etc.
Participants explored ways to make the tourism sector more resource efficient and environmentally responsible. Through plenary sessions, keynote speeches and expert working groups, delegates discussed initiatives such as tourism villages, training programs and investments in nature-based attractions. Speakers said these approaches can help create new economic opportunities, support local development and protect natural and cultural heritage for future generations. İlknur Seydamirova with İlkin Mehdiyev reporting from Baku, Azerbaijan.
Over in the UK, Labour's leadership race is beginning to take shape, with Andy Burnham emerging as the clear front-runner to succeed Keir Starmer. Zainab Farajzadeh filed this report earlier.
Andy Burnham remains the clear front-runner to replace Prime Minister Keir Starmer after receiving growing support from senior Labour figures. Starmer announced his resignation on Monday, soon after Burnham formally launched his leadership bid after being sworn in as MP for Makerfield. He has since secured a significant endorsement from Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who has decided not to run himself and is instead backing Burnham's campaign. The support has fueled speculation that Burnham could become Labour leader without facing a serious challenger. However, senior party figures are still considering whether to enter the race, including Chief Secretary to the Treasury Darren Jones and former Armed Forces Minister Al Khans. Meanwhile, Starmer is to remain in office until a new leader is decided. He chaired his first cabinet meeting on Tuesday since announcing his resignation. Labour's National Executive Committee is expected to meet in the coming weeks to finalise the timetable for the leadership contest. If Burnham is elected unopposed, he could become both Labour leader and Prime Minister as early as next month. Meanwhile, opposition parties continue to demand a general election, including Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch and the right-wing Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Reaction from voters has been mixed. Some are questioning whether politicians are focusing on the issues that matter most to local communities. Others are expressing cautious optimism that Burnham could bring fresh ideas to the government. Starmer's resignation follows mounting pressure from Labour MPs after weeks of poor polling and internal criticism. All eyes are now on whether any major challenger emerges to test Burnham's path to number 10. Zena Ferzadeh, A-News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
The leaders of Hungary, Poland, Czechia and Slovakia have gathered for the first Visegrad Group summit in 2 years, seeking to rebuild cooperation on migration, the EU budget and climate policy, despite continuing divisions over Russia. Pablo Gutierrez reports from Győr, Hungary.
For the first time in 2 years, the leaders of Hungary, Poland, Czechia and Slovakia are meeting under the Visegrad 4 banner, with Prime Minister Peter Magyar hosting the summit. The meeting brings together Prime Minister Donald Tusk of Poland, Andrej Babiš of Czechia and Robert Fico of Slovakia as the four countries try to revive a partnership that once carried weight inside the European Union. Now, during the migration crisis a decade ago, the V4 often spoke with one voice and used that unity to influence debates in Brussels. Now the group is looking for common ground again. Among the issues on the agenda are the European Union's next long-term budget, migration policy, and concerns over climate measures, including the emissions trading system. The four governments share support for tighter controls on irregular migration and have raised questions about the cost of some of the Green Deal policies. Now, they are also seeking a larger role for Central Europe in the future of EU decisions. But the differences between them have not disappeared. Russia remains one of the biggest dividing lines. Slovakia's Robert Fico has maintained close ties with Moscow, while Poland and Czechia have taken a tougher position on the Kremlin. Hungary still depends on Russian energy imports, though Peter Magyar has worked to rebuild relations with European partners since taking office back in May. Now, analysts say the summit is as much about symbolism as policy. The V4 is trying to show it can still act together at a time when Europe has seen the rise of many other regional alliances. Now, whether that unity translates into real influence inside the European Union remains to be seen. For A-News in Győr, Hungary, Pablo Gutierrez.
Iran and Pakistan are looking to deepen economic and security cooperation as President Masoud Pezeshkian makes his first foreign visit since last week's agreement with the United States. Mariam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian arrived in Islamabad on Tuesday at the invitation of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. It's his first foreign trip since the signing of the deal with the US last week. President Pezeshkian was received by President Asif Ali Zardari, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and senior Pakistani officials to much fanfare, including a 21-gun salute. Traveling with the Iranian president is Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and a high-level delegation. They will discuss bilateral relations, economic cooperation, and regional developments with Pakistan's leaders. According to Pakistan's Foreign Office, they will review the full spectrum of relations, including trade, energy, border security, and regional connectivity. For Islamabad and Tehran, the visit offers an opportunity to translate long-standing political ties into deeper economic and security cooperation at a time of heightened diplomatic activity across the region. Mariam Zia, E-News.
Belgium has granted visas to members of a Taliban delegation traveling to Brussels for talks with European Union officials on migration and the return of Afghan nationals from Europe. The visit is likely to reignite debate over the EU's engagement with a government it does not formally recognize. Tamim Bahis has the details in Kabul.
Belgium has confirmed that 5 visas have been issued to members of a Taliban delegation for talks with European Union officials in Brussels. The meeting is expected to focus on migration, particularly the return and readmission of Afghan officials who do not have the right to stay in the European Union. According to Belgium's foreign ministry, the visas are highly restricted. They are valid only for travel to Belgium and only for a very limited period. The European Commission invited the Taliban officials last month as part of discussions on deportations of Afghan migrants. Officials say some EU member states are looking at ways to return people who have committed serious crimes or may pose a security threat. The Commission has stressed that the meeting is technical in nature and does not amount to recognition of Taliban rule in Afghanistan. Human rights groups have raised concerns, warning that talks could put Afghans at risk and undermine EU values. So far, Taliban authorities here in Kabul have not commented on the delegation's visit to Europe. For now, the EU is presenting the talks as a migration management discussion. But the presence of Taliban officials in Brussels is likely to remain politically sensitive. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A-News.
Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze has intensified his clash with European institutions, rejecting criticism of his government's record and accusing Brussels of interfering in the country's internal affairs. Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze is locked in a battle against top European institutions and he's not backing down. He told a press conference today that the European Parliament was behaving like the Soviet Union. At issue is a report being discussed at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which accuses Georgia of democratic backsliding. It warns that Tbilisi's ban on opposition parties is incompatible with Council of Europe membership. In response, Kobakidze dismissed the assembly as completely devalued, calling its resolution absurd. He also announced that Georgia will pursue a formal non-recognition policy toward the European Parliament. It's the same legal framework Tbilisi applies to Russia over occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia. He went further, stating that EU pressure to repeal Georgia's controversial grants law amounts to Brussels financing a 6th attempt at revolution. Kobakidze pledged a, quote, appropriate response if such efforts continue. The pressure, however, is not coming from Brussels alone. The United Kingdom has sanctioned TV Imedi and Post TV, 2 of Georgia's most watched television channels. The move has prompted businesses to suspend cooperation with both outlets. Kobakidze responded by calling Prime Minister Keir Starmer on the day of his resignation the world's lowest-rated prime minister. For a government facing censure from 2 major European bodies and now London, it is showing no signs of staying quiet. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
After a short break, we'll take a look at more top stories of the day. Do stay with us.
We are in
in Seoul's Republic of Korea, a country that for more than 70 years has lived in the shadow of unfinished war.
I was 18 years old when the Korean War broke out. My two brothers were dragged out to the front yard of the village public hall and forcibly subjected to a trial under the name of People's Trial.
The military demarcation line, created after the Korean War, became a massive wall, preventing separated families from meeting.
Less than a kilometer away lies North Korea.
지금 우리 무장력은 그 어떤 위기에도 대응할 철저한 준비가 되어 있으며
Подписанный сегодня договор предусматривает в том числе оказание взаимной помощи в случае агрессии против одного из участников.
Russian-Ukraine war now is connected with North Korean participation in Russian army.
The complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is the only outcome that we will find acceptable.
If the U.S. persists in such hostile policy towards the DPRK, there will never be denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. Let's move beyond our region now. It's 10 years since British voters backed Brexit. But what has changed since then, and how is that decision viewed today?
This means that the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
10 years ago, Britain voted to leave the European Union, a decision that became known as Brexit, combining Britain and exit. The debate centred on control. Supporters of leaving said Britain should make its own laws, control immigration, manage its own money, and negotiate independent trade deals. The Leave campaign was backed by figures including Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. Those who wanted Britain to remain said EU membership supported the economy, made trade with Europe easier, and gave the UK greater international influence. Then Prime Minister David Cameron backed staying in the bloc. Cameron called the referendum because his Conservative Party was divided over Europe and under pressure from anti-EU campaigners. On June 23, 2016, voters were asked whether the UK should remain in or leave the EU. The result, announced the next day, was narrow but historic. 52% voted to leave, while 48% voted to remain. Cameron resigned the morning after the vote. Theresa May, who succeeded him as Prime Minister, triggered Article 50 in 2017, formally beginning the exit process. Britain formally left the European Union on January 31, 2020, ending nearly 5 decades of membership. Though many practical changes took effect only after the transition period ended on December 31st that year. A decade after the referendum, the question is no longer only how Britain left. It is what leaving has cost.
Brexit has, exactly as economists predicted, had a significant negative impact on the UK economy. The UK economy is clearly weaker and smaller than it would have been in the absence of Brexit. Politically, of course, it's much harder to say. I would say two things. One is that we've had a period of political instability since Brexit, and that was not entirely down to Brexit.
But Brexit's impact has not been limited to Britain. It has also reshaped the European Union, forcing the bloc to adapt to the departure of one of its largest economies, biggest military powers, and most influential members.
Brexit obviously has been negative for the UK, but the EU was weakened by the loss of the UK, and that's particularly important in the current geopolitical environment. And the EU would be much stronger if it were to be reassociated with the UK in some form, particularly given the economic, geopolitical and security challenges we face thanks again to Trump's destabilizing influence, but also to the broader trends of the EU, the US, and China. And so I think far-sighted European leaders ought to say, let's put us, yes, of course, we want an economically beneficial relationship and we have to defend our own interests. But in the medium to long run, we would be much stronger with the UK on the inside in some form. And really, that should be something more of a priority, perhaps, for European Union leaders than it currently is.
10 years on, Brexit is no longer just the story of a country leaving the European Union. It is the story of a political promise tested by economic reality, and of a nation still trying to define what sovereignty, prosperity, and control mean outside the bloc.
The Commonwealth Secretariat and Azerbaijan's COP29 presidency have launched a new funding initiative to help small island states tackle climate change, offering grants for projects focused on resilience, ocean health, and sustainable energy.
The Commonwealth Secretariat and Azerbaijan's COP29 presidency have launched a call for proposals to support climate action projects across the 25 Commonwealth small island developing states. The announcement coincides with the start of London Climate Action Week and follows the launch of 2 joint flagship initiatives in April 2026. Under the COP29 Presidency Commonwealth Fund for Small Island Developing States, governments can apply for grants of up to $200,000 for projects addressing the growing impacts of climate change. Over the next 5 years, the $5 million fund will support initiatives aimed at strengthening climate resilience, improving ocean health, and expanding sustainable energy solutions. The fund is designed to help turn national climate commitments into practical action by building institutional capacity, strengthening policy and regulatory frameworks, attracting additional public and private investment, and promoting partnership platforms developed through COP29 presidency initiatives. It will support practical, high-impact projects that deliver inclusive benefits, with a particular focus on Indigenous and local communities, women and young people.
Let's take a look now at some news coming from the Middle East. Omanian Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Said received Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Kalibaf and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Muscat on Tuesday. The meeting focused on the latest developments in U.S.-Iran negotiations, as well as efforts to resume shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. According to Oman's foreign ministry, Sultan Haytham voiced support for the ongoing talks and expressed hope for their success in achieving a peaceful and lasting resolution to all outstanding issues. Discussions also covered the resumption and security of maritime navigation through Hormuz, Iran's nuclear file, and other related regional challenges. While diplomatic contacts between Israel and Lebanon continue, the situation along the border remains fragile. Efforts to advance a possible agreement are underway, but concerns over the durability of the ceasefire persist. Here's the latest on developments in the region.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the country's military leadership have said Israel will maintain its military presence in southern Lebanon. In a joint statement issued after a security meeting on Monday, officials said the Israeli military would continue operations aimed at maintaining a security zone and preventing threats against Israel. The meeting was attended by Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz, Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, and Northern Command Chief Ori Gordon. The statement stressed that the security of Israeli citizens and military personnel remains a top priority. The announcement came after talks between Iran and the United States in Switzerland, where efforts to reduce regional tensions and halt military activity across several fronts, including Lebanon, were discussed.
We want an agreement with Lebanon. We feel that there is no reason why an agreement with Lebanon cannot be taken forward. The only impediment is the terrorist organization of Hezbollah, which is why we believe that they should be disarmed and dismantled. Now, however that happens, then obviously Israel will be in favor of that, whether it's through diplomacy or whether it's through military force.
In April, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosted rare direct talks between Israeli and Lebanese officials. Both sides said the meeting was constructive. Despite diplomatic efforts, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has continued in recent months. A ceasefire announced on June 20th remains largely in place. Many displaced people sheltering in tents along Beirut's waterfront say they are not confident the ceasefire will last. Fears of renewed fighting are preventing some from returning home. Lebanese security sources say the truce has mostly held. However, there have been reports of artillery fire near Tyre, the use of sound grenades and Israeli drone flights over Beirut. The conflict has also strained a temporary US-Iran deal aimed at reducing regional tensions. Tehran has accused Washington of failing to meet commitments to help end fighting in Lebanon. US Vice President J.D. Vance said there had been progress in talks related to Lebanon and that negotiations were continuing.
And before we go, Colombia is awaiting its final verified election result after a deeply divisive presidential race. The left-wing candidate is challenging tens of thousands of ballot boxes, while the apparent winner is already receiving congratulations from abroad.
Colombia is facing uncertainty after left-wing candidate Ivan Cepeda challenged the election process following a razor-thin preliminary loss to right-wing outsider Abelardo de la Espriella. Cepeda says his team has filed complaints and will contest 57,189 ballot boxes. He urged supporters to remain calm, saying the country remains deeply polarized and that final results have yet to be confirmed.
I want to make a very cordial call for serenity and calm. And if there are public expressions in favor of or against any particular circumstance, they should take place strictly within the framework of calm and peaceful mobilization. If such mobilizations take place, which I want to be clear, we are not calling for.
Initial results showed De La Espriella with 49.66% of the vote, ahead of Cepeda by around 250,000 votes. Under Colombian law, a final verified count overseen by notaries and judges is required, although it was not yet clear whether that process would alter the preliminary outcome. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump congratulated De La Espriella, saying he looked forward to building a strong relationship with Colombia. Trump said De La Espriella had called to thank him for his support and predicted ties between the two countries would improve.
So he called me last night and he thanked me for the endorsement. He won the election. He wasn't anticipated to win, but he won, and he won handily. It's just an honor. He was just a good man.
The result points to a shift to the right in Colombia and adds to a broader rightward trend across Latin America.
Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for watching. Join us again tomorrow. And from all of us here at A News, have a very nice evening.